The reception is still going when Bex finds Daphne near the kitchen door and tells her, in a voice too low to carry, that she needs to stop. "Stop what?" Daphne asks. Bex's jaw tightens. "Whatever you think you're doing." That's always been Bex's move. She doesn't explain things. She closes them. She ends the conversation before you've realized one has started. And by the time Daphne has processed the words, Bex has already turned back toward the living room, picked up a glass of wine, and started laughing at something their Uncle Garrett said. Daphne stands in the doorway and thinks, I haven't done anything yet. She hasn't. Not really. All she'd said, an hour earlier standing near the buffet table, was something small to their cousin Teresa. Teresa had asked how Daphne was holding up, and Daphne, who hadn't slept properly in 9 days and had spent 2 weeks alone in their mother's house clearing the estate, said, I found something, going through her things. I'm still trying to make sense of it. That was it. That was the whole thing. But Teresa told someone, and that someone told someone, and by the time the caterers started collecting plates, Bex had received 3 texts. Their mother, Patricia, died on a Tuesday. Ovarian cancer, 18 months from diagnosis to the end. She was 67. She had strong opinions about throw pillows and weak opinions about confrontation, and she kept her private feelings in a specific drawer in her bedside table. Daphne found it while packing up the room. The drawer had a lock. The key was on a small ring Daphne almost threw away. Inside were 41 letters, organized by postmark, rubber-banded into 4 groups. The most recent was dated 11 years ago. The oldest from 1979, before either daughter was born. They were not love letters. They were something more complicated than that. Daphne sat on the edge of her mother's bed and read all 41 in one sitting. She didn't eat. She didn't call anyone. When she finally stood up, she walked to the window and looked at the garden her mother had kept for 30 years and thought, You never told me this. Not as an accusation, as the simple, heavy fact it was. Here is what you need to understand about Patricia. She was not secretive in the way people usually mean. She didn't hide things out of shame or strategy. She hid them out of a specific belief that some truths are private property, and sharing them uninvited is a kind of trespass. She said this to Daphne once, when Daphne was in her 20s and had asked about something she'd overheard as a child. Some things belong to the person who lived them, Patricia had said, even from family. Daphne had accepted that. She'd grown up in this family. She knew how to read its silences. What she hadn't known, what the letters made undeniable, was that her mother's silence about this particular thing had not been neutral. It had been a choice. A sustained, deliberate, 41-letter choice. And Bex already knew. That's what Daphne suspected, standing in the kitchen doorway, watching her sister's shoulders settle back into something easy. Not the letters specifically, not the details, but the outline of the thing, the shape. She didn't have proof yet. That came later. First came the Facebook post. Bex published it 3 days after the funeral. 6 paragraphs, addressed to anyone who loves our family, describing Daphne as someone who had chosen grief as a performance and was spreading fabrications about our mother's life at the worst possible moment. It said Daphne didn't have the full picture. It said Daphne had always struggled to separate what was real from what she needed to be real. And then it said this, Our father raised us both with everything he had. That is the only story worth telling. Every relative received a call that week. Their mother's oldest friend, and Daphne's employer, an elementary school where she worked as an administrator, received an anonymous tip flagging her as emotionally unstable and unreliable. Daphne did not respond publicly. She read the post twice, set her phone down, and went back to the letters. Because Bex had made one mistake. Just one. But it was the kind of mistake you only make when you're working so hard to sound ignorant that you accidentally prove you're not.
To understand what happened, you have to go back further than the funeral.
you have to go back to how this family decided, a long time ago, which stories were allowed to exist. Daphne is 43. Bex is 47. There are 4 years between them, and for most of their lives, those 4 years functioned as a rank. Bex was the one who knew more, remembered more, got there first. She was the family's institutional memory, the one who could tell you what everyone ordered at every Christmas dinner going back to 1994, who kept the photo albums organized by year, who remembered every birthday without a reminder. That kind of memory is a form of power. Daphne understood that early. Their father, Raymond, died 12 years ago. Heart attack, early morning, no warning. He was a quiet man who loved woodworking and cricket and made the same 3 jokes on rotation. Bex was destroyed by it. Daphne grieved too, but Bex came apart in a way that took 2 years to reassemble. She had been his person, the firstborn, the one who looked like him, the one he called my girl, in the particular way that lands differently when you're the eldest. Or so everyone had always assumed she looked like him. Daphne had never thought about it before finding the letters. The letters were between Patricia and a man named Gerald Ashby. They started in 1979, which was 2 years before Bex was born. The early ones are careful, formal even, but by letter 6, you can feel the restraint starting to give. By letter 12, dated March 1980, Patricia is writing things she would not have said aloud in any room she shared with another person. By letter 15, she is writing about being pregnant. Gerald's response to that letter is not in the drawer. Daphne doesn't know what he said. She only knows that by the time letter 16 arrives, 7 weeks later, Patricia's tone has shifted into something flat and final. She writes, "I understand. I won't ask you again. I'm going to handle it the way I think is best, and I need you to respect that." Raymond proposed 4 months later. Daphne is not a person who rushes to conclusions. She sat with this for 3 days before she let herself think clearly about the math. She is an administrator. She works with dates and records and the kind of paperwork that doesn't have feelings about what it reveals. She knows what 4 months means. She knows what "I'm going to handle it" means from a 26-year-old woman in 1980 who stayed. And she knows that the most recent letter in the drawer, the one from 11 years ago, which is the last one, which ended the correspondence for good, is from Gerald to Patricia, and it says, "I heard Raymond passed. I hope the girls are taken care of. Both of them." Both of them. Not your daughters. Not the family. Both of them. The way you'd write it if you knew you were one of the reasons there were 2. This is the thing Daphne is still sitting with when Bex's Facebook post goes up. She hasn't told anyone. She hasn't drawn the conclusion out loud. She's been holding it carefully, the way you hold something you're not sure is yours to hold. And then Bex writes, "Our father raised us both with everything he had. That is the only story worth telling." If you haven't been thinking about this story, those are just the words of a grieving woman defending her father's memory. But if you've been reading 41 letters, if you've been living inside the specific weight of the word "both" for 72 hours, you hear something else. You hear, "I know which story you found, and I know it before you've told anyone." If you've ever been the person in the room who accidentally understood something you weren't supposed to, you already know where this goes. Subscribe, because this channel exists for exactly that moment. Daphne calls Teresa that night. Not to compare notes, not to process, just to ask one question. "When I said I found something in Mom's things," she says, "what did you tell people I meant?" Teresa pauses. "I just said you seemed like you'd found something upsetting. Something about the family. I didn't say anything specific because you didn't tell me anything specific." Daphne thanks her and hangs up. So Bex didn't know what Daphne found. She only knew that Daphne had found something. And she still published 6 paragraphs, called relatives, contacted an employer, and wrote, "Our father raised us both." Not, "Our father raised us." Both. With the emphasis sitting exactly where it had to sit. You don't fight that hard against a story you don't already know. The call from Daphne's principal comes on a Thursday. It is brief and uncomfortable, and ends with the words, "I'm sure it's nothing. I just wanted you to be aware." Daphne says she understands, thanks him, and sits at her kitchen table for a long moment after she hangs up. She is not angry, yet. She will be. But right now she's in the specific, cold space that exists between understanding what someone has done and letting yourself feel it. Her employer. Bex called her employer. There is a version of Bex that Daphne has always given credit to. The organized version, the dependable one. The woman who showed up for every family obligation and kept every birthday in her head, and was the first person you'd call if something went wrong. That version of Bex is real. It's not a performance. Daphne has relied on it. But Bex also has another gear. Daphne has watched it engage twice before in her lifetime. Once when a neighbor threatened to report their mother for a noise complaint, and once when Bex's ex-husband tried to renegotiate custody terms without a lawyer. In both cases, Bex moved fast, moved quietly, and moved completely. She didn't just defend, she repositioned. She made the other person the problem before the other person could speak. Daphne is watching that gear engage now, and she's the neighbor. She's the ex-husband. She's the person Bex has decided needs to be repositioned. The question is, why? If Bex simply believed Daphne had gone through their mother's things and found something embarrassing, a debt, an old argument, a letter from a friend, the response would not be 6 paragraphs and a call to an employer. That's disproportionate for a rumor. That's proportionate for a threat. Bex published that post before she knew what Daphne had found, and the post still contained the word both. Daphne opens her laptop and goes back to Gerald Ashby's last letter. She reads it slowly this time, not just the line about the girls, but the whole letter. He's careful, mostly. Condolences, a little formal distance, the sense of someone observing an old agreement. But near the end, he writes, "I know Patricia made her peace with everything. I hope the same is true for everyone who needed to." Everyone who needed to. Not everyone. Everyone who needed to. Daphne reads that 4 times. She picks up her phone and searches Gerald Ashby. It's not a common name. He's 72, retired, lives in a town about 2 hours north. He has a daughter named Sandra, who is a teacher. He has a LinkedIn profile that lists him as a former civil engineer. He has a face. Daphne looks at it. She closes the laptop. She sits with that for a while. Here's the thing about discovering something that reorganizes your entire childhood. It doesn't arrive cleanly. It doesn't come with a chapter heading and a clean before and after. It arrives in pieces, and the pieces don't match each other at first, and you keep putting them down and picking them back up because none of them feel like they belong to your life yet. Daphne had always looked like her mother. Bex had always looked like someone. They'd said Raymond. Everyone had said Raymond. But actually, standing in the kitchen now, Daphne is realizing she doesn't remember exactly what Raymond looked like at 47. She only has photos. And in photos, resemblance is something you can convince yourself of if you need to. Patricia had needed to. The comment section on Bex's Facebook post is 63 entries long. Most of them are supportive. A few are careful, relatives who clearly don't know what to say. Their aunt on their father's side wrote, "We love both of you girls. Please take care of each other." And Bex replied, Thank you, Auntie J. Some of us are trying. What do you do when someone who is supposed to know you, who has known you your whole life, decides it's easier to make you the problem than to sit inside the truth? Tell me in the comments, because Daphne is about to find out exactly what that choice costs. She doesn't respond to the post. She doesn't call Bex. She doesn't reach out to the relatives. She goes back to work Monday, walks past her principal's office and does her job. And she drives to see their aunt on their father's side, Auntie J, on Saturday. Not to ask about the letters, not to reveal anything. Just to ask one question, as casually as she can manage. When Bex found out Dad was sick, years before he died, when things were just starting, do you remember who she told first? Auntie J tilts her head. She told me first, actually. She was very upset. She said she wasn't sure how much time they had, and she needed to, I think her words were, she needed to make sure she understood their history before it was too late. Daphne nods slowly. What did you take that to mean? Auntie J pauses. I thought she meant she wanted to have the hard conversations while she could. Some children do that when a parent gets ill. They want to say the things they never said. Or, Daphne thinks, they want to ask the questions they've always been afraid to ask. Bex texted her the day after the Facebook post. Not to explain, not to apologize, just, you should know what you've caused. Daphne read it, set the phone face down, and left it there for 6 hours. She's been thinking about what Bex knew and when. Not in a prosecutorial way. She's not building a case. She's trying to understand the shape of something, the way you would with a piece of furniture you've lived around your entire life and suddenly realized is covering a door. Here's what she now believes to be true. Their mother told Bex about Gerald Ashby while Raymond was dying. That's what the conversation with Auntie J confirmed, without Auntie J knowing she'd confirmed anything. Bex had gone to make sure she understood their history while she still could. Patricia would have seen that coming. Patricia was not a woman who got caught off guard by the people who loved her. So Patricia told Bex. She sat her firstborn daughter down at some point during those 18 months Raymond had left, and she told her the thing she had been keeping for 47 years. And Bex held it. She buried it. She helped Raymond through his final months and stood at his grave and cried in the specific way of someone who has just found out something enormous and is grieving two things at once: the father she'd had and the certainty she'd had about him. That part Daphne can hold with some softness. That part she understands. What she cannot hold softly is this. Bex had 11 years after that conversation to decide what to do with what she knew. 11 years to figure out if she wanted to find Gerald Ashby or leave him alone, or tell Daphne, or keep it private forever. 11 years to sit inside it. And she spent those 11 years pretending the drawer didn't exist, which would have been her right. Daphne genuinely believes that. Except that the moment Daphne accidentally stumbled toward the same truth, Bex's response wasn't to finally have the conversation. It was to make Daphne disappear. 6 paragraphs, 3 calls, 1 anonymous tip to an employer. Not, can we talk? Not, I think I know what you found and I need you to understand why I didn't tell you. Not even, please, not yet. Just erase, reposition, make her the unstable one before she can be believed. Daphne drives to Gerald Ashby's town on a Sunday. She doesn't plan to knock on his door. She's not even sure what she's doing there. She parks 2 streets away from the address she found and sits in the car and looks at the trees. His town is quiet. It's the kind of town where people move when they're done proving something. She doesn't knock. But she comes back the following Sunday, and the Sunday after that. On the 3rd Sunday, she realizes she's not going there to find him. She's going because it's the only place she can be that isn't the place where she's Daphne, the unreliable one, the one spreading fabrications about her dead mother's life. There, 2 streets from an address she's never approached. She's just a person sitting in a car, holding something that happened before she was born, deciding what it means. The anonymous tip to her employer was traced. Not officially, not in any way that would hold anywhere. But Daphne's school is small, and the principal mentioned it had come from a personal email address, and the address, when the principal let it slip, contained a surname she recognized. It was their mother's maiden name. Bex had used their mother's maiden name. Not her own. Not a random alias. Their mother's. Daphne sat with that for a long time, because it could mean that Bex was careless, or it could mean that Bex was so convinced she was protecting the family that she felt entitled to invoke the family name while doing it. That she believed what she was doing was an act of preservation, not aggression. That's the part that's hardest. It wasn't cruelty for cruelty's sake. It was cruelty in the name of something Bex had decided mattered more than Daphne's version of the truth. And that's the most dangerous kind of cruelty. The kind the person committing it experiences as love.
6 weeks after the funeral, Daphne calls Bex. Not to confront, not to present evidence. She calls because she's realized that waiting for Bex to come to her is the same as waiting for the drawer to unlock itself. It's not going to happen, and Daphne is the one with the key. Bex answers on the 3rd ring. Her voice is careful, the way it gets when she knows something is coming. "I'd like to meet," Daphne says. "Just us. Not to argue." A pause. "What do you want to talk about?" "Mum," Daphne says, and then, deliberately, "and Gerald Ashby." The silence that follows is not short. When Bex speaks again, her voice has shifted into something lower, something that strips away the careful and leaves the raw edge underneath. "Where did you find them?" Not, "Who is that?" Not, "I don't know what you're talking about." Where did you find them? And there it is, the door that was always behind the furniture. They meet at a coffee shop neither of them usually goes to. Neutral territory, the kind of anonymous place where a difficult conversation becomes just another background event. Bex arrives first. Daphne watches her through the window for a moment before going in. The way her sister holds her coffee cup with both hands, the way she's looking at the table, not the door. For a second, she looks exactly like someone who has been waiting for this conversation for 11 years and is terrified it's finally here. Daphne sits down. "She told you when Dad was dying," Daphne says. It's not a question. Bex doesn't confirm it out loud. She just nods, once, small. "I didn't know there were letters," Bex says eventually. "She didn't tell me about letters. She just told me the basics, what happened, why she made the choices she made." "Did she tell you his name?" "Yes." "Did you look him up?" Bex's hands tighten around the cup. "I looked. I didn't reach out. I decided—" She stops, starts again. "I decided some things are allowed to stay where they are. And when you thought I'd found something, I panicked." She says it flatly, without self-forgiveness in it, which is somehow the most honest thing she's said. "I didn't know what you knew. I didn't know how much. I thought if I could make it about your state of mind, it would—" She trails off. "Go away," Daphne finishes for her. Bex looks at the table. "I called your principal," she says. "That was wrong. I used Mom's name, and that was wrong. I don't—" She stops again. Her jaw works. "I don't have an explanation that makes it okay." Daphne looks at her sister, really looks at her, and tries to locate the version of this woman who has known this thing for 11 years and carried it alone, who watched their mother die knowing what their mother had given her to hold, who stood at Raymond's grave for the 2nd time as someone whose understanding of that grave was entirely different from anyone else standing there. She doesn't excuse what Bex did. She can't. But she can see that there are two losses in this room. Daphne's, the loss of knowing, the loss of a certainty she didn't even know she had. And Bex's, which is older and heavier and has been hers alone for 11 years. Patricia had given Bex the truth and then died. She hadn't stayed to help carry it. That, Daphne thinks, is the part she might be most angry at her mother for. Not the secret, but the timing of its release. Handing someone a weight like that during grief and then leaving. She should have told us together, Daphne says. Bex looks up. Her eyes are wet. Yes, she says. She should have. That single sentence is the first true thing they've said to each other since before the funeral. And it costs both of them something. The accusation, the calls, the 6 paragraphs, the employer, none of it disappears in this moment. It doesn't work like that. But underneath all of it, there is something Daphne can now see clearly. Her sister didn't do those things to hurt her. She did them to preserve the last thing she had left of a mother who had trusted only her. That doesn't make it right. It just makes it human. It takes another 4 months before anything between them resembles normal. Daphne doesn't publicize what she found. She doesn't go to the relatives Bex called, doesn't respond to the Facebook post publicly, doesn't tell her principal the full story. She carries it the way her mother would have wanted, privately, in her own time, on her own terms. She looks up Gerald Ashby one more time. She reads about his daughter Sandra, who teaches secondary school in the town where he lives. She thinks about what it would mean to send a letter, and then she thinks about what it would mean not to. She keeps both thoughts on the shelf without resolving them. Some things belong to the person who lived them. Her mother was right about that. What Patricia was less right about was thinking she got to decide alone which things those were, and for how long, and for whom. Because secrets don't just live inside the people who keep them. They live in the gap between the people who don't know and the people who do. In the slight wrongness of a family photograph, in an emphasis on a word that shouldn't need emphasizing, in the way one daughter always looked a little more like someone no one could quite place. That's what Daphne has been sitting with these 4 months. Not just what she knows, but the shape of what she never suspected. She had a whole life inside this family. Holidays, arguments, love, ordinary Saturday afternoons. And during all of it, this was in a locked drawer. She doesn't feel betrayed by the absence of it. She feels, more than anything, a kind of tenderness for her mother. For the 26-year-old woman who made a decision in 1980 and spent the next 40 years being faithful to it. Patricia was not a villain in her own story. She was a woman who chose and kept choosing and did the best she could with what choosing costs. The thing Daphne says to Bex, 3 months after the coffee shop, the first time they manage something that feels close to a real conversation. I'm not angry at her. Bex is quiet for a moment. I am, she says. I'm still angry. I know. It'll probably pass. I know, Daphne says. That's the plan. There's a particular relief that comes, not from resolution, not from everything being explained and filed away, but from the moment when the people who love each other are finally standing inside the same version of the truth. Even a hard truth, even one they didn't ask for. This is not a story about a villain. Bex did something calculated and harmful, and she knows it. She's acknowledged it. And the work of whatever they are now is going to take longer than 4 months. But Bex is also a woman who was handed something enormous by a dying parent and told, in essence, to hold it alone. She handled that badly. She will have to live with how badly. And Daphne, who found 41 letters in a locked drawer and still hasn't figured out what she wants to do with a phone number 2 hours north, is going to have to decide what she believes about family secrets, about the right to know, about the difference between the truth that's yours and the truth that belongs to someone else. Patricia believed those were separable. Her daughters are learning they're not.
What would you have done with the letters? Would you have reached out? Or would you have put them back in the drawer and kept the life you had?
I want to know. Because I don't think there's a clean answer, and I think the people in this community know that better than most. If this one's settled somewhere in you, somewhere you're still sitting with, there's another story waiting for you right now. Same channel, same company, a different room, but the same shape of question underneath it. I'm Hanny. People always show you who they are. Wettedy just slows it down. I'll see you in the next one.